The first stock photography company I opened an account with was Alamy, and that was maybe 8 or 9 years ago when smartphones were just beginning to come into widespread use. But to understand why it's almost impossible to make a living from stock photography, I'll go back first even a lot further than that, to around 1980 when I was a young guy living in Headingley, Leeds, England. At that time I knew a professional photographer who seemed very pleased to have had his work accepted by a picture library, as I think stock photography companies were better known then. Perhaps because he knew I was more interested in writing than photography, he compared being accepted by a picture library with being accepted by a literary agency. Once accepted, you're halfway there, he claimed, because it's in their interests to get your work sold. And I think he was right. My big mistake when I submitted my first photos to Alamy was to think that those circumstances still prevailed. Today, getting your work accepted by a stock photography company means almost nothing at all. There is almost no significance whatsoever in this. And the reason is, and this is even more the case today than 9 years ago, digital storage costs have come down to the point of being almost negligible. You could put 1,000 high-resolution images, even 10,000, on a stock photography company's website, and it's literally just a drop in the ocean on their servers. Still thinking about what that photographer had told me all those years previously, and perhaps not realizing that just on the very same day I was accepted as a new photographer on their books, probably dozens of other photographers were too. I even wrote to Alamy to point out that my photos had been with them many weeks and none had sold. Of course, I just got an automated response. I finally understood how tiny the chances of any of my photos even being seen by anybody were when I looked some of them up by the keywords I had assigned to them, and generally found that they appeared scores of pages down in the relevant search results. If you're looking for a picture of the Type A 101, are you going to scroll down to page 90 to see what's available there? Of course not. So, unless I had some other way of getting people to see my photos, I realized my chances of selling any of them were very close to zero. I later closed my Alamy account and didn't bother opening accounts with any other stock photography company because I couldn't see the point unless I had some means of leading potential buyers to my account, and I didn't. I wouldn't have bothered to open another account if I hadn't seen an article written years before that by a woman who claimed that she had, quote, never made so much money in her life, unquote, as she had since she made her photos available on the website of a stock photography company then called iStock Photo. Going by my own experience, I had to give very little credibility to that photographer's claims. Yet I could not dismiss them entirely, especially taking into consideration the fact that her article had been written a few years previously in what was then regarded as the heyday of microstock. Microstock photography is defined by Wikipedia as shown here, but frankly I think there is very little to choose between microstock and non-microstock today. All major stock photography companies listed on this Wikipedia page are microstock companies, including Getty Images, if only by virtue of the fact that they own iStock, as iStock Photo is now called. Finally, after days or even weeks of thinking about it, I decided to register with iStock Photo. Why not, I reasoned. I didn't have anything to lose, as I was not planning to give them exclusive rights to my photos. And so I submitted a few photos and some personal details. Well, I certainly didn't regret it. Maybe I should rephrase that. Well, I certainly didn't regret it immediately. In a matter of days after I had submitted my photos, I began receiving emails telling me I'd sold a photo. I went into my account. It was true. I was actually selling photos. I submitted some more photos and sold some more. Then, after about another week, I thought I'd better go into my account and give my bank details. Obviously, I was ready to get paid. Or so I thought. It took me a long time of looking over my account before I felt I had to write to iStock for confirmation of what it appeared I had earned. It seemed to me that I had been earning just 9 US cents per photo sold. If true, this was definitely not the kind of transaction I had imagined. The other thing that didn't seem right was that iStock had taken 89% of the earnings of each photo, and I was getting just 11%. This seemed incredible. So I sent off my email for confirmation or otherwise, and a few days later got a reply. Yes, it's very competitive, they told me. Then I suddenly understood the logic of the system. Of course iStock would take 89% of the earnings for all the hard work done in making the photos available. All I had done, on the other hand, was take the photos. I had to feel fortunate they only took 89% and not 99%. However, much as I would have liked to do my bit to help iStock make more money for itself, with earnings like these, it was obvious my future as a stock photographer was going to be something other than I had imagined. How long can a photographer even survive earning 9 cents a photo before being forced out on the street? With earnings like these, I wouldn't even be able to maintain my equipment and pay overheads like electricity usage, let alone make money. Sooner or later, I would be forced to sell my gear. And in fact, I was, although I did have another income, so I didn't end up destitute. I now have only a simple 12-year-old point-and-shoot. At that time, I didn't know about the 1 cent per pic deal from 500 pics, and probably would not have believed it if somebody had told me about it. In fact, I believe, although I have no way of proving it, that probably the majority of photographers, or at least a very large minority, with stock photography companies, never actually get paid anything, because they never actually reach the minimum threshold for a payment, even if that's only $10. At 9 cents a pic, you would have to sell over 110 photos to qualify for that, and many people who register with a company like iStock will sell perhaps a few to a few dozen pics, and that's it. That's one reason stock photography companies now prefer amateurs and go out of their way to attract them, rather than grumpy professionals who always complain about the low rates. Most such people, with just enough skill to produce marketable images more often than not, and the company's software will sort out those images that don't qualify, will be willing to write off such small amounts, and even if they eventually close their accounts, few will go chasing after something between 9 cents and $10, especially if doing so means coming up against the dreaded capture guards that typically protect a company's help desk from actually having to respond to an inquiry. Some will even feel chuffed to have ever sold anything in the first place. Others will simply forget all about their forays into stock photography if they don't get anywhere with them. The stock photography companies understand this very well, and although there are typically ways to get paid any small amount through companies like Payoneer, the stock photography companies also realize that most contributors don't know this, and also wouldn't necessarily want to spend the time opening an account with a company like Payoneer for such small amounts. So, in effect, the stock photography companies don't just get cuts like 89% of the earnings on a sale. For many sales, they get it all. Knowing that they are virtually giving their photos away, a growing number of photographers are giving up trying to sell and putting their images in the public domain. However, putting photos in the public domain does not mean that stock photography companies will not want a 100% profit on the sale of your photos, as I will now explain. Sometime after I closed my account with Alamy, I went looking online for a photo of Yip Man, Bruce Lee's Kung Fu teacher, to use in a video introducing Wing Chun Kung Fu on my YouTube channel. I didn't bother specifically searching for a public domain image because I knew that all photos of this long-dead martial arts master were already in the public domain. So I was a little surprised when one of the first links to come up was to Alamy's site. Yes, as I subsequently discovered, Alamy scours websites with large numbers of public domain images, like Wikimedia and Flickr, downloads them, and puts them up for sale on its own site, complete with watermarks to give the impression that these public domain images are actually protected by copyright. As this Wikipedia page points out, this is, unsurprisingly, a topic of some controversy. I then found that at least one photographer has taken Alamy to court over his public domain photos being sold by them, and of course lost the case. Once a photo is in the public domain, the photographer cannot claim ownership over it, so these public domain photos are Alamy's to sell as they wish. Of course, the buyer may not realize that the same photos can be downloaded elsewhere for free. And of course, Alamy understands this very well. So, basically, in circumstances like these, if you do realize that a photo Alamy is offering for sale is actually free elsewhere, then you have two choices: download it for free or pay Alamy. Well, come on, look at these prices. From just $200 down to a mere $20. Who wouldn't want to pay Alamy at such low prices? They're almost giving away this free photo. So, that's what I mean about some stock photography companies perhaps still wanting to get a nice tidy 100% profit on your free public domain photos. And although I'd love to support the Alamy cause with $200, it was pretty evident that if I did, I wouldn't be able to afford to support my career as a 9 cents a pic photographer any longer. I should mention that not all stock photography companies behave like this. Dreamstime, for example, has public domain images, as you can see here. You can access them this way. Claims to have over 1.2 million of them. Or go via free photos here. Click to download, and you have to open an account, but that's the only drawback. And I guess I should also mention that Getty Images, which owns iStock, and the public domain site Unsplash, is also known to engage in the same practice as Alamy, as can be seen here. Not to mention, even trying to collect fees from photographers for their own images, which they had put in the public domain. And even using strong-arm tactics to pursue copyright violations, sending demand letters for sums arbitrarily set by themselves, and even sending collection agents. Consult the Wikipedia page for more info, but I suspect there is much more that couldn't fit on the Wikipedia page and wouldn't fit in one of my YouTube videos either.